Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. We, within the Ventures team, have done a lot of work lately to review some of the trends that are happening in life and health, and we're very excited to share with you today a little report that we've put together on what we've been seeing lately to kick some of the conversations off for the next 2 days. So, who am I? I'm part-time senior associate, part-time director, but full-time entrepreneur fan and data nerd. We gathered a lot of insights, and we're really excited to show you what's going to happen today. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what are the data sources that we picked on, what are some of the corporate interests, basically what the industry is telling us on where things are moving. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into what the top 150s are. So that means where the startups are coming, how do those match, and what's in store for this year. So as you guys probably know, we have over 80 corporate partners on the insurance side. We're very excited of how our platform has grown over the years. And what's more important is how we're leveraging the insights that we collect from the corporate partners. So for those of you that don't know, we've built the connecting tissue for our platform, and that's called Playbook. It's our online, basically, it's a ledger where we're recording all the interactions of everyone in a way that we can make sense of all the data points. We launched it at the end of 2018, and we're extremely excited with what's happening with this. If you are a corporate, chances are that you've engaged with Playbook, and we're very, very fascinated on how the product is evolving and how we can better serve your corporate innovation needs. And the reason for that is we're providing you guys with the ability to discover startups that are out there. We're reducing the friction so that the entrepreneurs can come to us and can engage with you guys. Because as Saeed mentioned, you guys are the dollars that matter. It doesn't matter how many dollars we raise from VCs. What matters at the end of the day are the customer dollars. We're enabling the corporates to track the pilots and to engage more closely with those entrepreneurs, and at the same time, making sense of the data that we're gathering. So, in a nutshell, providing the ability to discover, creating a community such as today, where we can bring everyone closer together, no matter the distance, no matter whether they're in China, whether they are in Southeast Asia, anywhere in Europe, Africa, we're bringing everyone closer. And at the same time, using that data to tell you a little story about what is happening right now. And so, as we parse through the data, we realize that there are some trends, obviously, that are going up, what is hot, what is staying relatively the same, and what's not really cool anymore. And so, diving a little bit deeper into what it is now that makes this very interesting, it's customer experience. Across the board, everyone is talking about how we can better serve our customers. It's not just about having a flashy UAI anymore. It's about what are the additional services that we can provide to our customers. How can we delight them and make something of a unique experience so that if and when we're selling a commodity, such as an insurance policy, we're able to retain them because they want to stick around. Because that will make your NPS scores go through the roof. And as you all probably know, NPS is a very important metric. It's not one that shines across the insurance industry. At the same time, a lot of people are focusing on what's happening in AI. Now, this is really interesting because you've heard this buzzword over and over again. What does it really mean? And here's where the data is telling us that everyone across the board is paying more and more attention to what's happening in AI, ML, and computer vision. At the same time, where do we get those insights? Where do we get that data? We're extracting it more and more from IoT devices. These are here to stay. It doesn't mean that you need to have sensors all across the building. It means that you're leveraging the sensors that you can get, for instance, on a company like Nightscope, a portfolio company of ours that has robots roaming around and providing better security for everyone. It's about enabling and leveraging the digital tools that are out there so you can actually keep delighting those customers. At the same time, the more data that we collect brings additional problems. And so data management is obviously one of the most interesting things that are happening right now. And across the board, it's been a constant issue on how to deal with it. Increasing costs in AWS servers are obviously something that's becoming more and more of a problem for our corporates. So how is it that we leverage better tools, whether it's Azure, AWS, or Google? How are we tracking and managing that data? On the life and health side of things, diagnosis, prevention, and early stage detection for different diseases is now something that's here to stay. We, a couple of years ago, looked at this as a trend that was up and coming. It's now across the board something that has to be provided. And so what's interesting at the same time is what's going away. Surprisingly enough, even though distribution is such an important piece of the puzzle here, the agent experience is not something that you guys are telling us that is such a big concern for you anymore. Whether it's because you're using direct-to-consumer channels or you're leveraging other tools, the fact is that the agents are decreasing in terms of importance. Now, when it comes to blockchain, whenever someone says that word, people usually just run away. And this is a little bit concerning because we know it's the future, but it's not quite there yet. And that means that we are going to have to wait a couple more years before the technology is good enough that everyone can deploy it. At the same time, we're also seeing that there's a lack of interest when it comes to robot assistants. And this was especially interesting when we were looking at wealth management tools and other kinds of robo-advisors. Also, VR and AR and mixed reality is something that even though it was on the hype cycle, say 2 or 3 years ago, is no longer as important as it used to be. So what are some of the things that are up and coming? What are some of the trends that are not said as IoT and AI right now, but are actually going to become more important in the coming years? We're seeing that the data is telling us that microbiome, which means the microorganisms that everyone has that enables us to fight germs and other bacteria, that enables us to break down food and create energy and produce vitamins are going to become more and more relevant as people need to fend off bigger and bigger bugs out there. Remote health, as I was mentioning, is now something that's going to happen across the board. If we're looking at the future of working and how it's going to be remote, remote health is, I would say, what's going to happen beside it. How we can provide better healthcare to everyone out there. How can we prevent the spread of diseases that can start in China and can within days or even maybe hours spread to other countries? So this is to put everything in perspective of what we've seen so far coming from our anchor partners. This is the industry telling us this is what's important. Look at how customer engagement, IoT, and AI are very, very relevant. Same with data management. And you can see how some of the other trends are actually going down or staying relatively the same. Now, when it comes to the startups itself, we went through 450 startups. And what you see today at Selection Day is a curation of over 180 startups that have gone through our several batches. So it's really interesting, again, to see how everyone is associating themselves with AI. And this is whether Common and Microsoft have instilled this thing across the board, and you can see now rappers associating themselves with AI. But the fact of the matter is, AI is obviously here to stay. And it's up to you guys and how we can work together to discern whether or not there's actual AI behind what everyone is claiming. SaaS, software as a service, as a business model, is also here to stay. It's interesting to notice that less and less insurance partners want to engage and want to pay for this subscription services. But the fact of the matter is that startups are trending that way. It's a business model that's reliable for entrepreneurs. It enables you to pull on and off a service whether you want it or not, shut it off if you don't want to. It provides a constant stream of revenue. And if you've heard me complaining on LinkedIn lately, there's going to be a lot of securitization on that front that's going to become a more a revenue stream for other startups that are going to be providing debt to entrepreneurs. On the cyber insurance and risk side, this was, if you've seen this graph, you've probably heard how it's a booming area of P&C. But what's interesting, it's not growing as fast as we expected. If you see on the y-axis, it's not as big as the former graphs. And that's because across the board, we're seeing that there's a disconnect between cybersecurity and cyber insurance. And this was super interesting to us. When we reviewed the data, we realized that usage-based insurance, UBI, is no longer something that is being provided by too many startups. And as we double-clicked on this, it's mostly because the unit economics for startups don't really work. We've seen over and over again entrepreneurs offering UBI and then switching to a full-time or a monthly payment service where they can actually build a business on. So when it comes to the life and health scope of the startups here, this is to put matters in perspective again. As I mentioned, AI and software as a services are obviously the big players here, and cyber and IoT are basically coming up. And it's interesting because we hear from the one side what the corporates want, but this is what the startups are providing. And so when both of them meet together is when you start having those interactions, the one-on-one meetings that we call the deal flows. And so we can see across the board that IoT and wearables are when most of this matchmaking happens. When we leverage and when we say AI, what does that mean? It's providing more data sources for better underwriting tools. It's what you guys care about. It's basically where the industry is going, and it's where we think that the most value can be bring together between the startups and the corporates. To us, it's very, very interesting what's happening with new products. It's obviously something that we feel sometimes is a little bit too early for the corporates, but we definitely think it's going to shape the industry in a matter of years. So before I finish, I want to tell you a little bit of what are some of the things that we're seeing right now in the life and health space that we think are going to shape the decade. We've gotten to the point where the income of a household is no longer able to support the expenses that it used to. So if you look at this graph, back in 1985, it would only take 30 weeks to get enough income to support all those expenses. Nowadays, it takes 53 weeks. So do you see what the problem is here? The year only has 52. And so when we see that there's a rising cost in not only college, vehicle and household has relatively stayed the same, but when you look at healthcare and how much it has grown, it's staggering. We now know that people, or the number one reason why people go into bankruptcy is health debt. And so as we're building a platform and we're providing people the opportunity to come together and solve one of the hardest problems that are out there, I want you guys to think a little bit of how we can make this world, as Said said, a better place. And we have a huge challenge when it comes to healthcare. It's not just about changing some of the habits that we have. This is actually affecting everyone's livelihood. The life expectancy in the US has declined for 3 years steady. That means that even though we're the country that spends the most amount within healthcare, our people are actually living less. And this has propelled people to look for other solutions. So there's now 8 million people that have gone into crowdfunding platforms such as GoFundMe to look for alternatives to get coverage where they are no longer able to get it. This is the story of Megan, who is a mother of 3, and basically her husband had to go on GoFundMe and create a crowdforum platform, or leverage a crowdforum platform to get the funding to get her breast cancer treatment. And it's interesting because we see more and more Americans having to leverage this sort of opportunities to get the access to the money that they need for treatment. And it's not just cancer, it's across the board on a number of other diseases. What's more surprising is the fact that there's 35% of the people that's contributing to this are just anonymous people. It's not within your social circle, it's not your coworkers, it's people that don't even know you that are contributing to this. And so 20% of adults in the US have contributed in one way or another to this crowdfunding platforms to provide better health to other folks. And so as we're closing here, we have, as I mentioned, amazing opportunities to come together as a platform. Said has talked a little bit about what we've done in other verticals such as smart health. It's the opportunity to improve healthcare and basically within 5 years change the outcome of this industry. But I'm going to leave it now with the stars of the show today, which are the startups that are tackling the big problems that we have. If you need anything, let me know. This presentation will be available to our anchor partners exclusively, and we're really excited for the killer lineup of startups that we have. So, Rachel, the floor is yours, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugenio. All right, guys, how are we feeling?